Hello everyone, my name is Dave Mobbs from X-Rite Photo Europe, and I'd like to welcome you to our latest webinar, Portraits with Power, with X-Rite Coloratti Master Frank Doorhof. This event has been sponsored by X-Rite and Macphun. We'll be taking questions halfway through the webinar and also at the end, but unfortunately due to time we can't answer all the questions. So please use the questions box provided and we'll take a selection of questions for Frank. Before Frank gets underway, let me give you a quick introduction. Okay, Frank was brought up in a family of photography and video enthusiasts. He teaches workshops on model photography, has a studio in Emmeloord in the Netherlands, or he shoots on location. He has created instructional DVDs and books that are used worldwide. Frank also teaches for Calby One Training. To find more about that, please visit calbytraining.com/author/Frank Doorhof. Make sure to check out Frank's UK tour in July by visiting Frank's website, www.frankdoorhof.com. So for the topics, in the webinar, Frank will cover workflow, retouching, shaping with light, three-dimensionality, expression, and movement. Also, make sure you check out Frank's best-selling book, Mastering the Model Shoot, which is available on Amazon. Okay, well, I'll pass you over to Frank now, and we'll get the webinar started. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, Frank? Yes.
I hope you can see my screen now.
You're on now.
I love the way you say, it looks like my navigational system. So that's really cool. Okay, let me stand in front of the light so people can actually see what I'm saying. Let me change the light a little bit on me. Hey guys, and welcome to the webinar. Now, one of the things that's the most important for me when doing a photograph is that it has to have power. But it also has to have a little bit of, how do you call that? Well, storytelling and three-dimensionality. And one of the things that a lot of photographers nowadays don't work with anymore is shadow. And shadows are so very important because if I do this, you don't see me anymore, right? But if I do this, you can actually see me. So if I stand into the light, you actually have the beautiful, okay, when I stand into the light, you can see my face, right? And when I move my face around, you can actually see a shadowed side, or you can see me straight on, or from this side. And that all creates three-dimensionality. And for me, the most important thing is that the three-dimensionality translates back to the image. And remember that in the old days, even in the old days, people worked a lot with hard light sources. If you look at the old movie theaters, Fresnel spots, really nice lighting. But most of all, pictures really were alive. And when you look now at the pictures, you see a lot of photographers using big softboxes. And if your softbox isn't 2 meters wide, come on man, mine is 2 meters 1. It's all about size. And for me, it's all about size, but the other way. The smaller, the better, because now I can really steer my light. And what I'm actually using is a grid. So I will point it towards you guys for a moment, and you can see what I mean. It's a very narrow beam of light. So if I move this light, you can actually now see straight through the grid, or you can't. And that's one of the most important things, that you have to make sure that that light hits the subject where you want it. So I'm using gridded light sources. Now, how does it look with a model? Now, let's see if we have a model here. Maybe Anna Mattea. So we have our model here. And, hello.
Hello.
Your name is?
Anna Mattea.
Look into the camera and say hi.
Hi.
So this is Anna Mattea. And what we'll actually do is we'll just place this light on her and just see what happens. So the best thing is I want to shape light. So of course I can use it like this, straight on her face. But I don't like it because at that point you can't really see what I mean. If I move it to the sides, you will get these nice shadows. Now if I move it far away, the light fall-off is really slow, meaning a lot of light is falling on my model. And well, it isn't that interesting. But if I move it really close, the light image quality will be totally different. And there's a quick light fall-off. We call this the inverse square law. The closer you move your light to a subject, the faster the light will fall off. So you get a really high-powered contrasty image. So let's start with that. The first thing I have to do is meter the light. And there's a lot of discussions about light meters. Some people say, you're a nerd if you use them. Well, then I'm a nerd, because I use a light meter. But I only use it for one simple reason. It speeds up my workflow. Because now I can simply aim it towards the light. I get a meter reading of, in this case, 16.9. Now I know if I go down 9 clicks, that the first image I will take on f16 will be the proper exposure. That saves me a lot of time. Okay, so let's grab the camera and start with our first shot. If I'm not breaking my neck. There we go. So, Anante, are you ready? Okay. Now, when you're shooting with a lot of shadows, you have to be careful, because if I tell my model to look that way, you'll actually see that the image isn't that okay. It's, yeah, maybe if you have a really ugly model, this helps, but in this case, we don't want to do it like that, right? Anante, can you look into the light? Very nice. That's it. Look a little bit down. Awesome. Tilt your head just a little bit. And eyes up just a little bit. There we go. Now what you can see is that the first images are actually straight on the money. They're perfectly exposed. Everything is okay. And that's because I use that light meter. Very, very fast. There's only one problem, and that's color. Now, we're going to do black and white today. I didn't tell you yet, but I'm going to do black and white. Real powerful. But still, I'm going to use one item that I always use during a photo shoot. And that's the color checker. And I will tell you very quickly why I also shoot it, because I'm shooting black and white. I never know if a client wants a color image. If I shoot the color checker, I can always make a perfect profile. There's only one thing. You have to light it very even. So I will actually ask my model to keep it in front of the face, aim towards the light, and I will make a shot, and she will not hear this. I always make a little joke about it, and that will be a new book. I'm going to tell you, the software is still in beta, and the problem is you have to make a real funny face, otherwise the software won't find it. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Perfect. You can buy the book somewhere in 2016, The Funny Faces of the Color Checker. Now, the fun part is, when you shoot the image with the color checker, is that you always have that reference. The reference is very important, because although I'm shooting black and white, I still will do my color balance, because even in black and white, everything will be a little bit shifted. Like red will get different from green, right? Or yellow. If you have the perfect balance with your color checker, also your black and white conversions will be totally the same when you do it over and over again. But the first thing we need is a little bit of separation on the background for this shot. So let's do separation of the background. Now, how do you normally do separation on the background? Well, you can of course put a light on the background, but that's a little bit boring. So let's start by shaping my model a little bit more and using this one. I'm going to use a strip on the side to really shape the side of her face. There we go. And I'm using a grid also on the softbox, on the strip light. And let's start out with a one-on-one setting. So I'm shooting f16 on the model, and it's also let's shoot f16 on the accent light. 11.1. So I'm going to add a little bit here. There we go. And perfect. I want that real nice jawline to show. There we go. So now you can see that she's already being separated from the background. And this is a one-on-one ratio. Now let's go down just a little bit. Let's say one stop down. And this is always something that's a little bit more creative. I don't want to be, okay, I have to shoot one-on-one, or I have to shoot this ratio. Sometimes a ratio is very important. But for me, a ratio of 1:2 or 3:1 doesn't work. Sometimes it's 1.6:1 or 1.7:1. It's all creative. Chin up just a little bit. Perfect. Okay. Now, what I also like to do is play a little bit with motion. And now you see she has a ponytail, right? So, let's see what happens. Can you look at it? And as soon as I say yes, you turn around very violently. 1, 2, 3, go. 1, 2, 3, go. And again, scream without making sound, please. Otherwise the ball is scared. 1, 2, 3, go. So even with the ponytail, you can see that there's a little bit of motion. You see this? I love this shot. This is great. This would be great for black and white. Let's do black and white today. Yeah? Okay, now, but this is still a very broad light source for me, meaning it will give me a lot of light. Now, in the old days, there were these studios who really created high-power portraiture. And they became very famous with it. They shot, for example, the most famous artists. And today we're going to create something like that. It's not exactly the same, but we're really going to pinpoint the light. The only problem is because I'm going to pinpoint the light, the model has to sit down. Because otherwise, if she moves, the light will actually be different. So, Anna Mattea, I will clear up my stool, whatever it's called, and you can sit on that. Very nice. Sit down. I'm going to turn off this light source. It's going to be very dark in the studio, so the cameras will focus on the model and you will just hear my voice. It's like I'm going to hypnotize you. You only hear the sound of my voice. And I'm going to use a snoot. A snoot actually also with a grid. So it's a very, very focused light of quality. Very focused quality of light. I'm actually going to aim it straight at my model. She's going to hate me for this. And I use the Andron ELCs for this because they can actually go down very low in power. Because I'm so close, I really need it low. I only want her eyes to be lit. Really close. Here we go. Now look at your eyes here. And your eyes here. Perfect. This is how you have to stay. Take a position that's comfortable. Very nice. Now I'm going to use the light meter, of course, to meter the light. And you can see that it's really, really tight lighting. So if it's really tight lighting and so close, I have to meter a little bit different. Can you tilt down back? Now I have to meter really close. 5.6. So I'm going to go up. I want to go to F8. So there we go. Okay. Absolutely sure. This takes a little bit of, how do you call it, tinkering, trying it out. I will show you very slowly how we set it up. Okay, so look into the light, please. Eyes straight ahead. Can you look with your eyes in? Okay. So this really creates a sort of vignetting on her face. Only her face is lit, nothing else. So now we're going to add strokes. We're going to make sure that everything looks a little bit nicer. So we're going to do the same thing with this light. I'm going to turn this all the way down. I just want an accent of light. Not much, just a little bit of an accent. And you see that I'm not metering this, right? One of the main things from a light meter is you have to know when to use it, but also when not to use it. And when I'm in my creative mode, I will actually use the light meter to check stuff. But now I'm just adding lights. So not just there we go. So I'm now just giving her a kiss of light on the side, just making her stand out a little bit. But we also want that from the other side. So I have another light source here, and this is one without a grid. And I'll tell you why. This one I want a little bit more obvious. So I don't have a grid on this one. But it's also on a very, very low setting. There we go. And this one actually only takes care of her shoulders on the side, just giving it a little bit of an extra touch. It's actually too high. All the way down. This is a powerful stroke, so it doesn't go all the way down. But that's okay. Looks nice now. Very cool. With the Sony, I can actually see the image coming in before it's on screen, so that's why I know. So this is nice. This is okay. Now we also want something on the background. And as you can see, I use, or you can't see actually, because you see it as dark. It's a dark gray background. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add a little bit of light on that background. So I'm going to do that now. And you have to make sure that that circle of light is behind your model. And again, very, very dim. And by changing the angle a little bit, you can actually see that we're creating something of a more oval size. And I hope that the cameras can zoom in on that a little bit. So I need to close up. There we go. So here we have it more round. And when I move it to the side, I'll move it back a little bit, it gets a little bit more oval. When I move it closer, it can actually create something like a streak on the back side, or a line. You know, English is not my native tongue, so if I say something that's really stupid, it's because I'm Dutch. Okay, so let's see if this works. That's really cool. I really want it to be a little bit on the background, not too much. There you go, that's a little bit too much for me. I need a little bit bigger. So a little bit less light and a little bit bigger. And that's one of the main advantages. I can just move the light away and create a slightly bigger circle. And if you move it away, you need to add a little bit of power. Because you're moving your light away, so you actually get less power. Now let's see the result. That's much better. I really like this. So I'm going to sit down for a slightly lower angle. Now this is one of the best tips I can give you. Get one of these. They're really cool. They give you a very low angle because of course you can go down every time and shoot. It will hurt your knees or your back. These things are relatively cheap and they have wheels so you can run around in the studio after closing time if you get to. Do a little bit of a competition. You can really get low. Okay, look up a little bit. And because I'm shooting from a slightly lower angle now, the vignetting will actually be behind her shoulders. Really making her stand out. Really nice. Can you tilt your body a little bit towards there? Eyes down a little bit. Really cool. Very nice. Now that side light is a little bit too dark for me. Now some people will say just turn on the power. But what you can better do is not turn on the power only, but change the direction of light. Because we're working with gridded light sources, the direction of light is very, very tricky. So very sensitive also. So if I just move it a little bit like this, and add a little bit of power, not too much, like 4/10 of an f-stop, so it's very little. And you already have the effect that we want. They're really nice. On the tape, you look down, and then eyes up just a little bit. Because I want those catch lights in your eyes. A little bit more up with your eyes. Nice. Tilt your nose a little bit this way, and then look into the light. Chin up, chin up. Very nice. I'm now literally steering her face to get the look that I want. A little bit more your head like this. Look that way. More. Chin up. Very nice. And by moving this light around, I can actually shade it a little bit more. That's awesome. That's nice. Chin down just a little bit. Okay, look a little bit more my way. Stop. And your eyes here. Keep them here. As you can see, I'm using my hands to guide her, because that's the best way. Because then she actually has a focus point to look to. Really nice. There we go. This is cool. You can go a little bit closer for some special effect, or a little bit further away and zoom in, using the compression of the lens, just to give slightly different alterations to the shot. Very nice. Final one, look all the way up. Now you get a really nice dark shadow in her face, so we try to change the grid a little bit. Awesome, really love this. I'm going to keep that. And I'm shooting a lot in portrait mode because I like it in this setting. But actually when I'm shooting, like she's now doing something with her hand, I actually like it to be a little bit more in landscape mode. Do that again with your hands. Really nice. Tilt your head just a little bit. Okay, chin down and look that way. Nice. Chin to me again. Really nice. Awesome. You see that I'm shooting a lot of pictures from different locations. They're very subtle changes. But for me, a perfect shot often is very, very subtle changes. Okay, a little bit more that way. Chin up. There we go. That's really nice. Thank you. Okay. So now we actually have something that I really like. Let me see. What can we do more? Now that we did this, let's add a little bit of atmosphere on the background by adding a little bit more light. So now I used relatively little light. Let's just add it a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to tell you, can you lose your jacket? Very nice. Okay, just a subtle change in styling and see what the difference it makes. I love what you did with your hands. Yeah, that's really nice. And we have a little bit more light on the background. Now, what you can see is that the circle is not 100% perfect, right? Now, if I just change myself, my own position a little bit. Ooh, make it sexy, girl. But just changing my position, I can position also the background light. Just moving around a little bit and creating the look that I want. This is really nice. Awesome. And again, change a little bit proportion mode. What I like you to do is just cuddle with yourself. Like, oh, I really like it today. Yes, that's nice. Awesome. She has a wonderful smile. Nice. And final shots. One more. One final shot more. And then because we're having so much fun, and because it's too much fun to stop, and one more towards the light. There we go. That's awesome. Very nice. And now look straight into the lens, please. Straight into the lens. Very nice. Tilt you just a little bit. Awesome. Thank you. So let's make the selection and let's see what we actually can do in Photoshop with some of these images, because now it's getting really interesting.
Hi Frank, are we okay to go through a few questions?
Yes, no problem. We're going to switch over to Photoshop, so be my guest.
Okay, great. We have Johan, and his question to you.
Hello, Johan.
And his question to you is: you're often using gridded lights when shooting portraits, but suppose you don't have a grid. How would you use them then?
Buy a grid.
Buy a grid. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous, but really the gridded light sources really make that look. And if you don't have a grid, get one. Really, they're not that expensive and they're really worth it. Actually, when you buy your set, you will probably already get reflectors. Just add grids to it. They're really relatively cheap, and you get so much better image quality. What you could do is you have a really a really small softbox, is that you actually feather the light, meaning that you aim your light away from your model. And that way you can actually get it also really close. But I would just say if you don't have grids, buy it.
Okay, great, thanks. We also have a question from Giannis. He says, you've changed the light, but you don't shoot the color checker again. Is this right?
Yeah, normally, yes. But you have to remember that the color checker does one thing. It creates a profile. And a profile depends on two separate things. One, it's the, how do you call it? It's actually the lens in combination with the sensor, but it's also the light. And if you are really picky about it, every time you change your light, you should shoot a color checker without any doubt. However, you could also look at it from this way. As soon as you have the perfect profile for your sensor, use that profile. I myself, when I change light sources, I will normally choose an extra color checker.
Okay.
So I shoot them all the time, and they're like, it's a 10-second job, and if you need them, you have them.
Okay, great. Quick question from Sean. How do you manage the color banding on a black background when sending off for printing?
Oh, no problem. I will show that in a moment.
Oh, okay. Quick question from Johan.
There's a very
Sorry, Frank.
There's a very simple trick.
Right, great. Quick question from Johan. When using the snoot, you don't go higher than, say, f5.6 of f8?
It depends. You can use. I always determine the setting I use for the model. Now, if I would shoot this personally, I would probably try to get up at f4 to get a really nice shallow depth of field. But because it's a webinar, I don't want to take any risks, so I shoot on f8.
Okay, great. So
we'll see later in Photoshop tricks to do the depth of field a little bit different.
Brilliant. Last question from Wim. He says, sorry, why is the white balance on auto, or do I see it wrong?
No, you see it correct, because I'm shooting raw, and I shot the color checker. So what I'm now actually going to do, you see the beautiful face of my model over here? And this is capture one, but Lightroom works exactly the same. What you do is you go here to your color picker, and you just click here on one of the triangles that are actually gray. What I now do is adjustments, copy, edit, select all, and adjustments, past, or apply. And this works exactly the same in Bridge or Photoshop or whatever raw converter you use, Aperture. Now all the images have the right color balance. I will tell you why I shoot on auto white balance. In the studio, I will always shoot with color checkers, meaning I always have my correct color balance set up very quickly. However, when I go outside, I want that auto white balance because every time the light changes, the color changes, whatever. If I set it in the studio on, let's say, 5,400, there we go, 5,400 or 5,500 or 5,000, whatever the color temperature of your strokes are, and I forget, and I go outside, all my images come into Capture One or Lightroom, because for street photography I often use Lightroom, they come in with that color setting. It's a hell of a job to do an outside photo shoot, street photography or travel photography, and do color balance on each and every image, because every image will be different. If you just learn yourself to keep that auto white balance on auto, you can never forget to put it on auto again. And in the studio again, we have controlled lighting, meaning if I do the color balance on one image correct, I can just copy it to all the other ones. And trust me, I've had students who did studio photo shoots for the first time. They wanted to put in 5,400 degrees Kelvin. They shot the whole photo shoot, and the next day they had a wedding and they forgot to put it off auto balance. And of course, you're shooting RAW, so you can change everything you want. But it's still a lot of work to do it for each and every image. So that's why it's on auto.
Okay, Frank, thanks a lot. We'll take some more questions towards the end. Thanks for that.
Yeah, okay. I love this shot, so this is one of the first I'm going to retouch. I'm going to give this a 5. And let's pick a few of the other ones. And some people ask me, do you really go this fast through your images to select the ones you like? And yes, because the right one will pop out immediately. You will just see it and it goes like, okay, you have to retouch me. Like, I really love this one. And what I'm looking for is shadow and three-dimensionality. I just love that three-dimensionality. And that's what you get when you use really tight light sources. I actually love the end series here. This is really nice. This is really cool. I love this one. Okay, we actually got enough images now. Let's take that one also. So you see that I select more than I can retouch. And you have to remember that when you retouch, please always be very, very cautious that you don't that you don't retouch too many images. Because if you retouch too many, people will remember the ones they don't like. And the rest of your session will actually lose power that way. So this one I don't like as much anymore. So let's see which one I like more, this one or this one. I actually like the second one more, so I will remove this one. And again, I don't delete the images. Some people think that I'm actually deleting them. I don't, because I love the images. But I'm not going to retouch them. I also don't like this one anymore. Okay, so let's start with this one. Now, in Lightroom, what you actually do in your RAW converter, you do all your exposure, contrast, brightness, saturation, highlight, shadows, whatever. But because we use the light meter, the exposure is already right. And I like to do my lights very careful, so I don't need to change anything. In Lightroom, you can now use Command E and go straight into Photoshop. Now, some people ask me, how do you do that with Capture One? Well, very, very simple. You see here a gear. You go here and you see a profile that I created called Frank to Photoshop. What you actually see is I use a TIFF, ProPhoto RGB, and open Photoshop. And instead of Command E, I'm using Command D. And this will open up Photoshop straight out of Capture One. What it does, it copies a TIFF file to my hard drive. And it opens up Photoshop. So when I save it, it's on that position on my hard drive. It's a very, very simple technique. Okay, now because this is motion, I always say to my students and to everybody, please make sure that you are 100% certain that your cropping is correct. Don't crop later. But because I'm doing motion, I actually crop a little bit wider. So in this case, I have to do in Photoshop, I have to do a little bit of a crop because I do want it a little bit tighter. There we go. Okay, now the face. There's a lot of talk about face retouching, and I just found that the best way to do it is as follows. You create 2 layers, duplicate layers, and you call the first one skin, and you call the second one detail. And what you actually do is the bottom part you will blur. You blur it to a point where you can still see that it's a face, but you lose the fine detail. Don't overdo it, like 10 in this case. Okay. Now the top part, that's where the detail will be, and we call this frequency separation. You go to Image, and you go to Apply Image, and you will get the layer Skin and blending mode to Add. Now make sure if you use Add that you press Invert. If you use Subtract, you don't invert. But you see that there are 2 numbers here, 2 and 128 on Subtract, and when you use Add, it's 2 and 0. And I can't see any difference between the two, so just use what you like. Okay. Now create a new folder, and you drag these two in there, because then you can see the real difference that's going on. There we go. Okay. Now this doesn't look right, right? So what you do is you go to your detail, and you actually go to vivid or linear light. Linear light I like a little bit more. And now you see that there's no difference between the original and the edit group. So this is cool, because actually on the bottom part there's skin, and what every skin has, it has a little bit of an unevenness over the skin, and that really makes the image look like it's shot by somebody who just got a digital camera and shot a pretty girl. And we don't want it. We want a professional looking result, right? So let's do that. Now what you can do is you can use a filter called imagenomic portraiture, and normally you don't use it on a setup like this. You just run it. And what you see now is that I'm actually creating one layer with all the details. That was the layer on top. And one actually with all the skin. This is the blurred one. You see, you don't see any detail, only the blurred one. Normally what you want imagenomic portraiture to do is to create something that makes it a little bit more smooth. In this case, I don't want that. What I want is I want a totally smoothed out skin. So I created a preset for that. And what you can see now, and you can see it immediately, is everything is on full power. You select some of the skin tones, and it evens out the skin very, very nicely. And then you press OK. Now it runs really fast. You can already see that there's a huge difference. The fun part is that all the original skin detail is still there. So if you zoom in, you can see a before and after. Or even better, do it like this. It's very, very subtle, but don't overdo this stuff. Now you go on the detail layer, you take your healing brush, and you just paint over. And this is the fun part, because you now don't have to take care of any colors anymore. You just select somewhere where you like the structure, and you really can go and retouch the skin. Now you can take hours. I won't do that. I will do it very, very fast, just to show you guys the before and after in a moment. There we go. And I still sample sometimes because I'm used to that. I like the detail there a little bit better. Okay, good enough. And now see the before and after. This is like a 10-second fix. All the detail is still there. You see all the nice pores, but you don't see anything of the rough skin anymore. So this is really nice. Okay, now what I do, and a lot of people say that's wrong, but I do it anyway, is I flatten my layers. Okay. Actually, I did something wrong. Let's go back. Normally, imagenomic portraiture does a really good job, but make sure that if you do it on a more complex background, make a layer mask with a hide all. Now you see a black piece of paper here. Take a brush with white paint and just paint the effect in. Because sometimes when you shoot outside, imagenomic portraiture will also smoothen the areas that are actually having the same tones as your skin, and you don't want that, of course. Now this image I want to keep in color, but I want to give it a little bit of a pop. So I make a duplicate layer, and I go into a filter from a company called Macphun, and it's called Intensify. Now Intensify, I can't even start to begin how much I love this filter, because this actually changes the whole look of my images. And on every image from me, you see there's a little bit of Intensify. Now when you have something called poppy drama, you have to use it, of course. So let's give it a little bit of a twist. There we go. Now this is way too much, of course. So just back down the effect a little bit, and you see it before and after. It's still way too much. Well, we're gonna make sure that in a moment it isn't. So it's now processing. It's a little bit slower because we're running a lot of stuff on the background. But normally it's pretty fast. And it's a 36 megapixel file, so it can be a little bit slow. There we go. Now what I do is layer mask, hide all. Now you have a black piece of paper, so I'm going to use the white. And the only thing I do actually is paint it in the areas where I want a little bit of extra structure, a little bit of extra detail. So you're just actually painting with light a little bit. So a little bit on the eyes, the mouth, and on the hairs. And as you can see, it just makes it pop a little bit more. And it's subtle, but that's enough. Okay, flatten the image. Now go to 100%, look at the eyes. The eyes are a little bit too dark. So what I like to do is make a duplicate layer, take the dodge tool, and only go over the iris very quickly. Always overdo it, and then zoom out. Sorry, zoom out to fit screen. Now why zoom out? Because sometimes you're really up close and it looks great. You zoom out and you go like, oh my, what did I do? Turn it all the way down to opacity 0 and then start adding it. There we go. I really like the effect. This is better. Okay. And finally, I'm a 100% digital photographer sometimes, but actually I'm 99%. And I love to give it a little bit of a look. So I'm using Film Pack for that. And you can make different looks, but this one is actually one and that will speed up the webinar a little bit, which I already created. So let's go to Red Pop. There we go, press save. And then the only thing I have to do is take down a little bit of the color. Now this is something I do a lot, so actually I know what I'm doing. But if you start out with this, it will take a little bit of figuring out. But in the end, it's okay. Oh, that's nice. I will turn down my Twitter. Don't you love those messages? Message from K. If you want 18,500 extra Twitter followers, follow me. And they only have 25 followers. Yeah, cool. I'm really going to do that. So file close and save. Okay. So let's go to the real funky stuff. Let's create something cool from this one. Again, I'm going to use Command D to go into Photoshop. And I'm going to skip the whole skin retouching for a moment because I don't want to take too much of you guys' time. And what you can see is that there's a lot of debris on the background. I always love to call it debris, I don't know why. But there's a lot of junk on the background. So how do you solve that? Very simple. And this is also how you solve the bending for printing. You make a duplicate layer of your background. You take your Harry Potter stick, and make sure that you do it right, not like this, Frank. Go to tolerance of 7. Nope. Go to tolerance of 4 or 3. There we go. This is better. And make a very rough selection. It doesn't have to be perfect, because it's only for the retouching of the background. The only thing that's incredibly important, and you can see it going wrong now, is that you don't include anything of your model. Nothing. So go into your quick mask and make sure that there's nothing of your model selected, because that will be a real problem. As you can see, I'm now very sloppy, and that's no problem. There we go. Nice. Okay. Make your brush a little bit slower and press the X key to change the color. Now some people say, how do you know when white works or black works? I don't know. If black doesn't work, I will try white. And if that works, you only have 2 choices. So you're always right after 1 try. Some people say black conceals and white shows, or I was just trying. There we go. Okay, now feather this selection by, let's say, not 500, 4 pixels. Invert the selection. And cut your model. Now the model is gone. See? Okay. Now what you do is you blur your background really aggressively. There we go. And now you can see what I believe Johan asked. You see all these bandings, right? And this is a disaster when you bring something to the printers, because they will mess it up even worse. Now let's go into 100% so you can really see it. Now, this is actually a matter of Gaussian blur, because Gaussian blur actually takes away those details. And the computer doesn't have enough information to make it nice and smooth again. So how do you create something that's nice and smooth? Now, this is actually a technique that comes from also from audio, and we call this dithering. like a Super Audio today, they have a 1-bit system and they call dithering to make the sound better. But you can do the same with your image. So if you go to filter and you're going to add noise, and you're going to do that on a really low setting, like 0.5, you actually don't see any noise being added. But make sure you have Gaussian noise. If you use uniform, it doesn't work that well. Gaussian noise. And now you can see it before and after. And even on 0.5, it takes away all the bending. Let's go to 1% to make sure. Press OK. And now all the bending is gone. And you have a perfectly smooth background. Now get the model back, paste into place. And there we go. Now you see a little bit of a problem here. I was a little bit too sloppy there. But that's no problem, because we're going to... Oh, this is actually really bad. Well, OK, no problem. Let's go to flatten image, and let's very quickly touch that up a little bit. So when you are blurring that much, make sure that you have your selection correct. Normally it isn't this extreme, but in this case it is. So sorry for that, guys. I'm going to do it very quickly. And actually make it worse. Just leave it there. For the rest of the seminar, it's no problem. Okay, let's make a duplicate layer again. And let's go into a filter, which I also absolutely love from Macphun, and that's called Tonality Pro. Tonality Pro is actually a black and white converter, but it's so much more. So let's go into tonality. And one of the things that I absolutely love is those old-fashioned glamour shots, right? The artists, everything, and that's just cool. So how do you make that? Well, in Tonality, I actually created a profile called Smooth. And let's go to my user profiles, vintage. There we go. And it's a really smooth profile. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit too much. And I always do it a little bit too much, because if you do it a little bit too much, you can always tone it down. Now, the first thing you do is you make sure that you have all the settings that you need. And this is the tone curve, which is really important for that. You just add a little bit of detail on the bottom. And again, this annoys me, but I will make a proper retouch later on. And what I like to do is lens blur. And you can actually place your center, and I like it on the face of my model to really open up those eyes. And the rest will really get a little bit darker. I don't like texture overlaying. In this case, I don't need the vignetting. I don't like grain in my image in this case. And the only thing I now need to do is open up the bottom part a little bit. There we go. Now you can also get away take away the effect or brush an effect in. But the cool thing is you also have layers. So now add a layer. And actually on this layer, I want my exposure to be a little bit higher. And I want a little bit more shadow detail. There we go. A little bit more midtones. Play around. And the blacks a little bit more crushed. And I'm going to paint the effect in only on the areas where I want it. As you can see here, it's a little bit too much. I did it on purpose, of course. And now use your eraser tool to get it back. Now, I love this. Gives it a little bit more of a, how do you call it, a little bit more of a glamour look. Take down the opacity of your eraser and go over it one more time. There we go. Of course, you can change the softness. I like the softness to be over here for the final touch. And if you take away too much, don't worry. You go back to your brush again. And just paint the effect only on the areas where you want it to glow. There we go. Before and after with the layer. So that's really nice. And press apply. And now you get a really dark and moody image. And some people will say, I like to have a little bit more detail on the bottom. Well, I agree, but what you don't see always adds a little bit more excitement to the image, a little bit more of what's going on there, which I actually like. I have to do one more thing, which I love with these images, is I want to make it square. So I like the landscape mode, but with these images I somehow also like it to be a little bit more square. Now this is a pretty heavy filter, so it's processing a lot. And because we're running GoToWebinar on the background, it's a little bit slower. Dave, are there any more questions in between? Dave?
We've just got a quick question from Johan. He says, can I get the same glamour look with, for example, alien skin? Now, I'm not quite sure what that is, Frank.
Alien skin is awesome, and yes, you can. I just prefer at the moment for black and white Tonality Pro. But alien skin, without any doubt, is awesome. It's really, really good. Just as DxO Film Pack. They're both on my computer, and I'm always in doubt which one to use. And sometimes I'll use alien skin exposure for color, sometimes I'll use DxO. But black and white, for the moment, I'm using mostly this. So Tonality Pro from Macphun.
Okay, great. We don't seem to have any more questions at the minute, Frank. So let me know.
Okay, then I'm gonna do one more.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, no problem. Just ask if you have any questions in between.
We actually have some questions coming in now, Frank. Anna asks, does Silver Efex Pro give the same effect?
No. No, sorry. Silver Efex Pro in the past was my main to-go software for the black and white conversions, like many people. What Macphun actually did is they created something that's so much better and so much faster that I never ever go back to the Silver Efex anymore. The only thing I do like about Silver Efex is they have something called a pinhole camera setting, which I actually really like. If you are in the NIC suite, what I like about the NIC suite is Analog FX Pro. That one is awesome. And that's something that actually rivals many of the film look software. But for black and white at the moment, it's without any doubt Tonality Pro, which I really like. Great.
We've also got a quick question from Kevin. He says, what color space does Macphun work in? Bearing in mind the original was in Pro Photo, I believe.
Yeah. As far as I know, but they have to check it with Macphun, is they actually do work with my files the way I bring them in. But I don't know for sure, and that's really bad for me.
Okay, Frank.
We have to check. Maybe one of the guys of Macphun can answer that one.
Yeah, no.
But I think it's still Pro Photo, because in the end, my results in Photoshop still show up as Pro Photo, and I don't have any settings in Macphun itself to change that.
Okay.
But it's a guess.
Okay, Frank. Well, let me know when you're ready to wrap up, and I'll do the ending.
No problem. I will just show a few tricks with this again.
Great.
And then I'm ready, because then I'm almost out of time. Time flies, man. That's horrible. So now I've done a black and white conversion here. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to only use the Dutch tool. And you can see that some people are really, how do you call it, hours and hours they spend on Photoshop. And they don't like photography anymore because you need so much Photoshop. And one of the things I always try to teach people is if you understand your lighting, you can really make retouches like this in mere seconds. As you can see here, I'm only retouching for maybe a few seconds or a minute, and I already get my end result. And normally there's one step extra, and that is of course the skin smoothing, which I now skipped because I showed it and that takes too much time for the webinar. But you can see that the effects are really there. Now, if you are in the end in Photoshop and you think, oh man, I messed up, I want a little bit more detail here, there's a very simple trick. Make a duplicate layer, go to your Dutch tool, put it on about 30% and just paint in over the highlights. And that way you can get a little bit more detail. And don't overdo it, just very, very subtle. There we go. And file save. Oh, sorry. I always save in TIFF 16 bits, so the files are really big, and that's why at the end I always do my flatten image. Now, again, a lot of people say, why do you flatten your image? Try to store 1 gigabyte files on your computer. These are already in the 300 to 400 megabytes. If I add another layer, they will be around a gig. And with all due respect, the amount of stuff we shoot, it takes up a lot of space if we do it like that. On the other hand, my retouching is really fast and really simple and straightforward. So if I make a mistake, I can go back to the retouch and do it very quickly over. That's about what I wanted to tell you about high contrast portraiture, and I would like to give the seminar back to Dave.
Okay, thanks a lot for that, Frank. I'm just going to share my screen for a second, if that's okay.
No problem. Oh, you want the screen back?
Yeah, no, I can do that from here, Frank. It's okay.
I did it.
Can you see my screen now, Frank? Yeah.
No.
Okay, let me just check. 1 second. Sorry about this, everyone. It would just be 1 second.
Come on, Dave, you can do it.
There we are. Right, Frank, can you see my screen now? Frank?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, can you see my screen now? Sorry.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, I'd just like to thank Frank and thank you everybody for watching. We really hope you enjoyed the webinar. If there are any more questions, we'll try and collate these and answer them when we can. As you can see, we have some great special offers on from X-Rite and Macphun, which I can provide information and links for in a follow-up email. So at the moment, we have some good cashback offers on the Colour Monkey display and the Colour Checker Passport bundle, which together would have €35 cashback. We're also doing the i1 Photo Pro 2 now has €180 cashback. And also a special for the webinar only is you could buy Creative Kit Plus from Macphun, Tonality Pro plugin, Intensify Pro plugin from the Macphun store for 10% off by using the code FrankD. So that's for a limited time only.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, so it's a really good opportunity. If you're interested in any software you've seen, then or the products, then by all means, go and have a look at those. Like I said, I'll send this information over to you in a newsletter. So we'll also be uploading a recording this webinar over the next few days, so hopefully no more than 2 days, and you'll all receive the link. So don't forget, you can learn more about Frank and his work at www.frankdoorhof.com. And once again, thank you, Frank, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. And I hope we see you in the next one. Thanks a lot.
Thank you guys very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.